Admit. All right, everyone. Today is Tuesday, May 13th, 2025, and it is the MicroProfile live hangout. A link to the meeting minutes is in the chat. Go ahead and click on it and add your name as an attendee. Organization optional. Um, we let's see. Oh yeah, this meeting is being recorded, so it may be uploaded to YouTube at some point, and it's everyone's shared responsibility to take notes. Okay, the topics I had today, I was going to lead with the tutorial. Tarun joined the marketing call yesterday, which was very, very short because a lot of people are out. So he was going to join, I think, and do a little bit of a demo, but I don't see him here, so we may not cover that. And given his time zone, it's understandable. Talk a little bit about hosting MicroProfile in Jakarta and the discussion in straw poll thread I created. And the last one was talk about the 7.1 release. Um, let's see. So, all right. I think we can probably get started with the 7, sorry, not 7.1 release, the discussion thread and the straw poll that I had created. If Tarun joins, we're probably going to have to do a hard stop maybe in the middle of that discussion and switch over again, given his time zone. Um, but so let me open up a couple of tabs here. There's one. Okay, come on. Sometimes this let me move it over to a different monitor altogether. The taskbar for Zoom sometimes just gets in the way. There we go. There's one, and there is the other. So first of all, thanks for everyone that participated or is participating in both the straw poll and the discussion thread. Oh, Tarun's joining, so we're gonna sorry about that. Do kind of a hard cut over back to oops. Let me hit the admit button. And let's see if it adds him. There he is. Connecting to audio. Hey, Tarun. Still connecting to audio. There we go. Connected to audio. How you doing, Tarun? You're on
Yes.
mute? Ah, there
Hi.
you go.
Okay. Yeah, now I am unmuted.
Okay. Yeah, briefly during the short marketing call yesterday, you had wanted to join, and I think you were gonna do a demo or any kind of status update as it relates to the tutorial. So, how much time do you think you'll need?
Sure. Give me a few minutes so that I can just get my things ready in the system. I'll
Okay.
take, yeah, should be 10 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, just trying to judge timing here because we've also got the another topic that may take some time. So while you're setting up, just raise your hand in Zoom when you're ready. So kind of getting back here to
Sure.
okay. Um, Getting back to the discussion around namespace. Again, the namespace discussion in straw poll went first simply because it's a breaking change. It's a thing that's going to have the most impact on end users. So we had a good discussion, and you can kind of go through it here. I'm not necessarily going to go through that part of it. Oops, there we go. Get it in the same browser. Um, Then I tried to create a straw poll, and I guess my wording, I don't want to say it was controversial, but it was less than clear to some, which is understandable. The intent was, if MicroProfile were to move into Jakarta, is changing the namespace a red line where people would vote. Um, uh, Sorry, keeping the namespace for existing specifications. If we were to keep org.microprofile, org.eclipse.microprofile as a namespace, would that cause people to vote -1 on moving microprofile into Jakarta? Um, so the the trouble with a little bit of the trouble with the wording is some people are wearing more than one hat, right? They're wearing the microprofile steering committee hat, and they're also wearing the J Jakarta steering committee hat, right? And there is no Jakarta working group ballot on the right even proposed. They're kind of waiting, I think, for us. But since some of us wear both hats, the idea is, you know, if if we're to do this, what's the end result of the namespace, right? Because there's different opinions. So the way I worded it was, if we keep the namespace as it is, and we were to move over to Jakarta for specifications, then um, would that is that a red line? Keeping the namespace, would the vote then be a -1? This is kind of overall, right? So again, some of us are wearing more than one hat. So if someone were to receive on this Jakarta steering committee side, if they were to receive MicroProfile and say, yeah, we like this, let's go ahead and make the move, would they, want to have a change in namespace? Sorry, would they want to keep the namespace or change the namespace, right? So a vote of -1 means, we don't want to keep the, namespace or .eclipse.microprofile. And I guess this is, kind of confusing. Apologies. Trying to move the ball forward and just to see where, everyone stands. Try to get pre-agreement on both sides before we actually do a ballot on the microprofile side. Um, so, Ed and Jan kind of, came out and, thought the wording was confusing and apologies for that. And Roberto brought up a good point this morning to email saying, well, you know, if Jakarta moves, if MicroProfile moves into Jakarta, then some specifications may get moved into other specs, right? Config, REST client, JWT, and those, so maybe this is premature, right? Okay, trying to figure out where, one thing at a time where we all move. That's a very interesting dependency, and I hadn't even thought about really. Um, So I'd like to see where, let's use hands, everyone. You know, I've been talking here for a little bit, so let's see if we can get others to maybe comment on where we are, and maybe even a pause. Actually, Tarun, are you ready to do a tutorial demo?
Yeah. So
Okay.
I'm
Sorry.
ready.
Yeah, just before we go, I'm going to set context here a little bit.
Yeah.
Apologies, everyone. We're trying to give Tarun time to prepare his microprofile tutorial demo. Um, I kind of gave my intent out of the straw poll thread. Let's pause that. We'll have Tarun give the demo, and given his time zone, then he could drop off, and then if he'd like, and then we can continue with hands to get folks discussing the straw poll. So, Tarun, go ahead, and you're on mute.
Yes, I'm just sharing my screen. Okay.
John, you might need to stop sharing.
Yeah, I think I need to stop first. Oh, maybe because I'm the.
Okay, I have to, yeah. But
Oh, allow. Sorry. Here's all of a sudden the allow box. That's a problem with multiple monitors. Things are popping up all over the place. So, okay, you should be allowed to present now. Share screen.
yeah. Okay. So I'm sharing my screen now. Hope you guys are seeing the screen.
I do see the screen.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. So yeah, so I have MicroProfile tutorial. In this tutorial, this is the Antora site, and we have all the chapters here. So some minor fixes I just realized have to be done. For example, this fav icon I have to change, but this is applied as branding for MicroProfile. So the font and the coloring is as the MicroProfile branding, but probably yeah, I might have missed out some things with respect to branding. So in case I will share a link also where I have the UI bundle, which can be used for figuring out any branding issue. But about the organization of this tutorial is we have the chapters here. I will also remove this chapter title because the tutorial just will be like the name of the chapter. I will probably just remove these chapter 1, chapter 2 titles. So here there are various chapters. So we start with the preface, and preface is just the front matter. It talks about various it talks about the project and the content of various chapters. So these all is generated from all the chapters which I shared in previous few months. And so yeah, we have 11 chapters here, so which is Introduction to MicroProfile, the first one. And again, here there are a few things. One is the search. We can search with any topic. So here, if I say core profile, so it will show these search results as well, and then I can navigate to any other chapter based on the keyword search. So this is one of the feature, and it has light and dark mode. So this is the dark mode, and this is how the branding looks. Now, for each of the chapters, so we have here, first chapter is introduction. It is the introduction to MicroProfile. Mostly, so if I go here, this is all about what is MicroProfile, mostly theoretical concepts. It gives an introduction and gives details about various implementation, architecture philosophy, and some of the relationships with Jakarta EE glossary terminologies. But from second chapter onwards, we have an exercise or we have code which we will be building. So here, step-by-step instructions are provided in this particular tutorial about how to set up your development environment. That's to start with in chapter 2. And then further, we will be building the e-commerce application from chapter 3, where this is the core profile chapter. So here we will start with a simple RESTful service for product catalog. So I've demonstrated it using the MicroProfile and Jakarta dependencies. So this one is the code, but at the same time, I'll be putting up the code with README files in the tutorial as well. And in the preface, there will be a link to the code repository where the entire downloadable material will be there. the source code will be there. And what I have also done is I have also created dev container images. So if someone wants to try it out with GitHub code space, then all these tests can be executed. So there will be instructions in the README file to execute all these code samples. So here we have different chapters. So this chapter is about REST API, and then subsequent chapters is so in the third chapter we build a REST API, then we build Open API documentation, and then for same product catalog service, we will be extending it. So here there are examples and explanations about Open API, then MicroProfile configuration. So here configurability will be introduced in this. So there will be code samples. So maybe in next week, where I might need a little bit more time, where I can kind of demonstrate the code examples also, how they could be executed. But right now I'm just going through these tutorials where this is about chapter on the configuration. So here we have the code and their explanation and covering the key concepts of each of the MicroProfile standards. So here starting with configuration, then there is health check or MicroProfile health. And here all the checks about readiness, liveness checks is there with working examples and how the response is. So here this is demonstrated. And then we have chapters on matrices. So we just keep building upon the same example by adding more and more features and enhancements to it. And I have again provided what dependencies to be added and all annotations, important annotations and APIs, all are explained here. And probably, yeah, the code, as I said, code samples I will demonstrate maybe in the next session. Some of the README files is still in the process of completing, so that it is very intuitive for anyone who's going through the tutorial to get the repository and also try it out with instructions in the README file to how to execute it. So this is matrices, then fault tolerance. So as we move on to more chapters, we will be building more services. So in this particular chapter, we have introduced more concepts, and some of these concepts require communication between microservices. So here payment service is also introduced, and there are again code samples for fault tolerance. Then similarly, we will be creating the there are more chapters covered, which is on telemetry. Telemetry will talk about all the telemetry related APIs, how to get the traces, logs, and then with examples, some introduction to some third-party tools, their integrations as well. And then we have JWT, chapter on JWT. So which starts with the basics of JWT, how the JWT token looks like, and then looking into the APIs and how MicroProfile supports JWT. And then there is final chapter, which is on the REST client, where we will be building REST client. So here more services are introduced, which is the order management service. So which will have the client also. So both ways of creating a client is demonstrated. One is using the annotation by registering the REST client in the declarative manner. And then for dynamic client generation from dynamic properties, I've also demonstrated about generating client using the builder API. So and even exception handling. And yeah, this is about using the REST client builder and generating the builder API. So this is about the content of the tutorial, all the chapters, 11 chapters as planned. And then coming back to the MicroProfile tutorial UI. Yeah, so I will give one URL where I will share the tutorial UI. So for example, here, I will share the URL also to everyone so that you guys can see it offline. And,
Can you paste
looking
that
good.
link in the chat? We'll get it added to the meeting minutes.
Yeah, sure. I will put that in the chat. I will end this just to kind of get more time. But yes, maybe in next meeting, I
Okay.
will get the working code and yes, building it.
All right. Thanks a lot, Tarun. I see Jan has his hand up.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. One question. Did you mention in the introduction that there are more specifications outside of the umbrella spec?
Yes, absolutely. So here I have mentioned about that there is outside umbrella specs as well. And in the introduction, I have explained some of them as well in brief, that these are some of the
Oh,
outside
nice.
umbrella.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. I think Ed, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so this looks great. I really like the look and feel and the content looks really good. I have a question, or actually a request. In the README for the GitHub
Yeah,
repository, in fact, there's two repositories. There's the content and then there's the UI repository. Could you add links to the READMEs for both of those that point to the other one? You know, just so it's clear when somebody's looking at the repositories, if they want to build this themselves from the they have to go to the other repository, or if they're in the the UI repository, they can just direct them back to to each other. I think that would be helpful. My second question was
sure.
more, I guess, a question for us. Do the code, it looks like the code is all in line in the documentation, right? And so for a user to use this, we won't be providing, is it correct that we do not intend to provide them with a repository that builds anything?
No, we will provide the repository because although the code is there, for example, sometimes more configurations are needed, and there are not all the code is put in line. So the tutorial will have a code folder. Okay, so I will point readers to the code folder where for each of the chapter, there will be project which they can build. Because even if we provide the complete code, how to structure it and then how to run it, that may be difficult for readers. So providing a pre-built projects, so where is all the source code is structured, is what I'm kind of pointing it for each of the chapters.
Okay, so there will be another, will that be interleaved with the existing repository, or will you have a separate one that contains the actual source code? A separate repository?
Yes, it will be the same repository. So this files will be within the tutorial repository itself. And there will be a content repository where we will have chapters. So, and then there will be, so here there are chapters, but then there will be a folder which will be.
I don't know if you're, do you think, are you looking at another screen? You might not be sharing it.
Okay. Sure. So yeah, there is a folder, separate folder, which will be containing the code, source code.
Okay, all right. So that's still coming. Thanks.
Yeah, I think
So
Tarun was volunteering to
in the
come back.
previous, yeah, in the previous instruction about the repository path, and then readers can look into that repository from the path. And there will be the projects and instructions to build it. So they just have to clone the repository and run the commands provided in the README file, and they will see the code working.
But you have not checked in the code yet, right? The code isn't in the repository, the MicroProfile tutorial repository. Is it? I don't see it in GitHub.
Yeah, it is in the PR stage. So I will, once I'm completing the README, this PR will get merged. So I'm still in this work in progress. I'm consolidating the source code, running it, and just putting it in the format so that it is easy for everyone to use it. So this is something which is in the PR stage, and some of the chapters I'm kind of trying to complete and should be done this week.
Okay, thank you. I missed the PR.
Yeah, I think Tarun volunteered to come back next week, probably the technical call, and maybe demo us, a sample chapter on how to build and run. Am I correct, Tarun?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll look forward to seeing you next week. With just pick a chapter and we can kind of see it and what a user has to do to run the code. So that would be awesome.
Yes. Sure. Perfect.
Any other questions for Tarun before we let him go? All right. Hey, thank you very much, Tarun. This is helpful. We'll see you next week or whenever you're able to actually rejoin. I know it's late for you. Thanks for joining. Feel free to hang on if you want to hear more of the meeting, but you're absolutely welcome to leave as well.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Tarun. Oops.
Sure.
There we go.
I'll unshare.
Okay. No, I will share. Okay, go back to the browser. Okay, so we were talking about the straw poll. I had chatted for a little bit. I think I've talked enough about it. I'd like to get feedback from others on the straw poll. Most folks here, I think, have voted. Or the organizations have voted, but feel free to provide your input or feedback on the straw poll. Anybody?
I guess I would suggest, and I don't have the ability to raise my hand in Zoom, so sorry about that. I would suggest throwing out the results of this poll because I think it was too confusing. I think it was especially confusing to people, which was not including myself because I wasn't on in this camp, that wants to change the names as their top priority or their top preference. I think it leaves them wondering where to vote because it isn't at all clear if you were intending this to represent, that this is a red line, or not. And I know you had a statement that says that, but it's not actually in the statement that's being voted on.
Mm-hmm.
I think that people are very much confused by it and voting
Okay.
all over the place.
Okay. Good feedback. Jan?
Yeah, as I suggested in my comment, instead of having three things in one vote, maybe it might be better to maybe start with a straw poll on merging the working groups without any concerns and red lines, and finding out how many members have concerns that might prevent them to have the working group MicroProfile merged into Jakarta, because the Jakarta people are waiting for us now, getting that simple question out, how many members might have concerns if it is the namespace or something else, to find out if we have a majority already and can work on further consensus and a even bigger majority if we cannot convince everybody, or do we need to work on the merge itself, and it's still uncertain that the working groups will merge. I think that's the topmost topic that need to be answered, and then focusing on the concerns expressed there regarding red lines and the namespaces, that could then be a further question, finding out what is the preferences of the members there and the contributors too. So having separate simple questions, it's obvious how to vote. Because, for example, I gave that example with a slightly different wording on changing the namespace when merging the working groups. But for example, if Tommy Tribe wants to vote, it's not obvious for them how to vote then too, because they only want to have the namespace. They against the working group merge, as an example, at all. But if it happens, then they said they would prefer to get the Jakarta namespace on the specifications. So we need to ask separate questions, I think. But the topmost question, and that could be a straw poll at this moment, just to find out if there are any red lines of anybody against merging the working groups. And then, ask for comments on these red lines. So we find out where we stand, and then asking further questions about the part that will be part of the negotiation with the Jakarta people after a binding vote on the merge of the working groups.
So it sounds like, to more broadly characterize these, you're looking for more of a top-down, where first we do a straw poll on the move, and that generates discussion about red lines. The bottom-up approach, again, this is just my categorization, is start with the straw polls of the individual issues that could be red lines, that may, lead to a straw poll for the overall move.
We can do both at the same time.
We could.
For the namespace topic, because we identified that might be a red line for some of the members already. But going further with preparing the required vote where Jakarta is waiting for. And the Jakarta EE12 planning has started, so giving some sign to Jakarta, prepare for what is coming to you or is not coming, if that is the outcome, that might be urgent now, I would say.
So, my thought about Jakarta 12 is I think this is independent of that. In other words, I don't think that we should try to have a forcing function to make a Jakarta 12 timeline for this.
No, but giving the sign that Jakarta 12 can be planned with an already merged working group content is important. Otherwise, we need to have a separate discussion on Jakarta config, because that is required for 12.
That's a fair point. Although, you know, we need to do what's right for MicroProfile as well. So, you know, if there were another Jakarta release without a config API, you know, I don't know how I feel, you know, I don't know how Jakarta feels about that. I mean, ideally we can get this done in that time frame, because we don't want this to drag on forever, but we need to do what's right for MicroProfile. And, you know, our customers that use MicroProfile, and I worry a lot about the namespace change, and it forces people to go through this again. And I know there's just, that's my explanation of it. I know others are less concerned about that. I understand that.
What I tried to say on the email that I sent is that people are just looking to the namespace change blindly, right? In the sense that, okay, let's do the namespace change without any technical concern about something, right? And I mean, if you look into the history, right? I mean, the main reason why Jakarta or Javax moved to Jakarta was because there was no way to evolve those namespace under legal terms on Eclipse, right? So the namespace change was forced by a legal action, not a technical action, right? On the Eclipse side, or sorry, on the MicroProfile side, technically there's nothing, or legally there's nothing preventing us to keep the namespace. And instead of just looking to the namespace change blindly, we could just look into things that make sense, right? As the examples that I gave. I mean, and you brought up on Jan, on the config side. I mean, if there is going to be a Jakarta config, does it make any sense to rename a MicroProfile config or do the namespace on a MicroProfile config? We know that Jakarta REST is pushing for a long time to have REST client merge into their own spec. So does it make any sense to go and make the rename on REST client to then move it and then have to do a second rename when it if it merges to Jakarta REST? The same things can also be said to Jot, and you know, we were even working on that bridge spec, right? Because we know that Jakarta Security wanted to use things from Jot, right? So most likely, what makes sense is to merge the current Jot into Jakarta Security. Maybe you also want to merge OpenAPI into REST, even though Jakarta REST is already like a big spec, so I'm not totally sure about that. But just like thinking to do the namespace change blindly without actually having to do technical discuss what makes sense or not, or what's going to happen with each spec, it just feels wrong in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. More than one namespace change should be prevented. And what you missed in the list is we don't have the question for telemetry at all, because we are using a foreign namespace already for that. There's nothing, or not very much left when we do it. And if we do it per component spec from time to time, then there are ongoing breaking changes, which means MicroProfile umbrella spec releases, Jakarta micro empty space profile releases would have major releases only, because yeah, in every release, when there's at least one namespace change of a component spec, then there's a breaking change again, and I want to prevent that. And therefore it was easier to do it in one step. But at the end, we don't decide that at all here in this group. That's part when it's moved over to Jakarta, and then it should be discussed for every component spec how to handle that. But yeah, I want to prevent from the user's perspective that there's an ongoing breaking change somewhere in one component spec.
Well, I mean, with the current proposal, where you say when I'm not saying you're saying, but the current proposal where everyone is saying that yes, when it moves, it changes all the namespaces, right? Then you actually, well, I'm not saying that you're preventing MicroProfile specs to get merged into other Jakarta specs, but you're gonna have to go to another namespace change, right? Because then it's gonna be even problematic because you're gonna fall into things like shared package names and package names with different things, right? So I think it will be, at least technically, it will be more wise to just keep it as is, discuss what's going to happen with each component, and then make a decision individual per component instead of just doing like a big blind change and then figure out what to do later.
Is there any, I mean, I haven't seen anybody who says we're just going to do a rote change to everything, or just force it, this substitution of org eclipse MicroProfile to Jakarta. Is that, has anybody said that that's what has to happen?
Well, there's definitely people that have said that's what they would like.
Yeah, but I didn't
Right,
saw
but there's
somebody saying this is a red line not merging the working groups if the space is not changed, for example.
Well, so
Priority two.
I think we've, at least to my thinking, I think it's become clear that there's nothing that would force that, right? Like you said earlier, Roberto, there was a forcing function for the Java X to Jakarta, but there's no forcing function here. That's why I'm sort of advocating, this should be up to the working groups, well, the committer teams when they're reformed in Jakarta, right? And it will be, it may get debated there, but there's no forcing function, but that I think this working group can impose on the Jakarta EE working group one way or another. At least not that I know of.
Yeah, we're definitely not trying to impose. This is all about trying to kind of reach agreements out of band through collaboration.
So how would we try to make this happen? I mean, in my response, I was, conjecturing that we would have some kind of a clause in our, in our resolution. And I'm basically saying I don't, Oracle would not, be behind any clause, no matter what it said.
Mhm.
Right. And so I'm at a loss for how, what it is we're, how we would make this happen and what we would make happen. I don't think there's that anybody is there. There are a lot of people who said I have an opinion, right? At the end of the day, it's going to be who are the committers in the group that are actually willing to do something, to take some action, and is that committer team going to allow a committer to make those changes, right? And I thought we had set it up so that we could preserve the membership on whatever on the new projects, the projects as they move from MicroProfile to Jakarta, so that there was at least as good a chance, if not even a stronger chance, that MicroProfile as it exists today could continue to exert that influence. But they would be exerting it within the Jakarta EE working group.
So, Nathan, I see you're off mute. Did you want to say something?
No, I'm just off mute. I could say something if you want.
It's up to you.
I thought Jakarta EE was actually prompting us to have this, if I listened correctly on those calls, that they wanted some input or a recommendation from MicroProfile on where we wanted it to go.
I know that there have been debates, there was a lot of debate in config when there was a potential to have two configs. To me, it seems like this proposal, negates that entire discussion. It's a single config, and Jakarta EE has to figure out how to deal with it, whatever it is they're going to do. Right? There'll be a bunch of new members that'll come in, that were formerly part of MicroProfile working group that'll now be, members in that config group project, and they will have to collectively make a decision what they're going to do.
Yeah, I haven't got my arms around what might happen to config. I think there's an understanding that config is kind of a, I'm using air quotes, a special carve out, but
I was only bringing up config because it was an example where there has been discussion like this. I didn't mean to focus my attention on it.
But Roberto in his response also brought up some interesting points, right? It's like, well, what about JOT? What about, REST client?
Right. And so my opinion is there will be a bunch of decisions that need to be made, right? And we want to empower and hopefully, empower the committer teams to make the right calls, right?
Mhm. Are there any? I think I've seen this or heard this discussed in other calls, but it sounds like from a namespace perspective that there's nothing in terms of official policy within the Jakarta, working group ecosystem, right? So spec committee two and everything about the namespace, right? It's kind of assumed everything is going to be Jakarta dot asterisk, just for historical reasons. But is there anything like precluding, wanting to do, maintain existing namespace?
Eva checked that, and there is no official document that says it must be the Jakarta namespace. And it could not be because there were two namespaces involved right from the beginning. The Java X namespace and then the transition to the Jakarta namespace as the specs starts evolving. So there is no official clause regarding that. There is some decision made, I think, for the wrong reasons to the TCK namespace, that it cannot be the Jakarta namespace, which I think is completely wrong, because MicroProfile give the proof that the API and the TCK can for sure use the same namespace, even if it is not Jakarta. So, but that's a separate discussion, and that need to be held definitely within Jakarta. So there is no official reason or no blocker on the Jakarta side that need to be changed first to keep the namespace from my perspective. And that also means for MP telemetry, there is no need to invent a new API in the Jakarta namespace. We can still use and follow the decision we did in MicroProfile to use the hotel namespace in that case. I don't have it in a written form. That was a longer discussion on the speakers dinner at Javaland.
About the JavaX on the TCK, I believe that was because of the signature test, right? Because a lot of the servers were just doing bytecode instrumentation to do replacement on JavaX Jakarta, right? But that didn't work with TCK, so they had to keep the JavaX while they were still like dual maintaining both JavaX and Jakarta. So I'm not sure if that's still a thing with some servers, but that might still be something. So I think that's the main reason why it's still kept as as JavaX. Also, aren't there like some APIs that refer or use Corva as namespace that's also used by Jakarta? I know it's like super old, but still, I believe that like the Corva integrations are on the Corva, in like some Corva packages or so.
One of the hidden and non-official reasons is that some implementations capture the Jakarta namespace already, because they are defining their own API artifact, which is allowed in Jakarta. And they do it because of licensing issues, and then used for their own internal testing of their implementation, the Jakarta namespace, and that might create conflicts with the TCK. Tomcat is an example for that. And I think that's for the wrong reasons, because if not using the official API artifact because of licensing issues, then the API artifact should get another license or an additional license, like adding the Apache license to it. Or from my perspective, it could even be public domain, as the Supreme Court finds or defines after that fought between Oracle and Google, that that is fair use, and everybody can make use of that API of Java SE in that case.
Well, yeah, on the Apache side of things, they require all the builds to use Apache licenses, binaries. And I will guess that that's meaning that the APIs are being released with Eclipse licensing, not the Apache ones.
But it should be relatively simple to add an additional license, because there are specifications that under Apache license already on the Jakarta side too. And yeah, that's a solvable problem, I think. There are other reasons, like I think Open Liberty, Jared might explain that in detail. For performance optimizations, they use other API artifacts that combine some of the APIs. That might be another reason to not use that delivered spec API artifact. But yeah, that's Jakarta's specialty. From my perspective, we should start a straw poll and saying if somebody don't want to merge the working groups and have some red lines, then express these red lines and vote with a -1 in that call. Otherwise, if the merge has priority independently of the other constraints and red lines, then vote with a +2. And then we find out if we can proceed, and then we should approach to the Jakarta Steering Committee at the end with a binding voting of the working group members. And while we do it, we can further find out if there are other things that should be collected for the path of that transition, as we identified in the last week's call. But for example, if maintenance is required, of course, that should be done in the existing namespace, because otherwise it would create a breaking change if the namespace has to be changed for a service release. That doesn't make sense at all. And we need to find out which version we want to move, and where further support should be granted. So if vendors say, yeah, but I want to have version XYZ to keep it in the support, then we need to think about how we can do service releases for different versions of MicroProfile in the old namespace, for example. And yeah, maybe it's a good idea, suggested by you, Roberto, have a list per spec where arguments for keeping the namespace or changing the namespace can be collected. Because if it is planned to merge specifications already and the new namespace would not fit the result, so another breaking change can be foreseen, then it should be prevented.
Well,
So
as another example, right?
Sorry,
So
and let's keep this very short. I apologize for interrupting, just because we're at the top of the hour. But Roberto, if you can keep it really short, and then
I'll try.
I'll kind of
So
have a closing
as
comment.
another example, look at the GraphQL, right? So only IBM and Red Hat having implementing GraphQL. So maybe Jakarta doesn't having any interest in that, right? So why are you going to force a couple of vendors to have to move to a different namespace if the other vendors are not interested on that spec, and that spec is not going to be part of the platform? Right?
Yeah, we would have to do that too. So, you know, GraphQL is part of Element.
Okay, sorry,
It's not just them. Yeah. So I mean,
okay, sorry,
yeah.
but still, it's like a small number of vendors, right? So these vendors may agree that like this standalone spec is only used by us. There is no other interested people on that, so we can just keep it as is, right? As an example, not saying it has to be that way. Just
So sorry, I'm gonna kind of just close this out. I think what I might do in the discussion thread is I'm seeing a kind of a couple of points about, well, let the committees in Jakarta decide what they want. And I kind of see this also in the Roberto's points. So I think I might try and continue the discussion along those lines in the discussion thread.
John, I just want to clarify. To me, it's the committer teams. Committees
Yes.
have, their oversight.
Good point.
Right? It's the committer teams.
Good point. Yeah. Thank you for clarification. I think that's a very useful continuing discussion along that, because I think both Roberto's comments, Ed, and your comments kind of follow along that thread. So we're at the top of the hour. So thanks everyone. And next week is the technical call, and it sounds like Tarun might be back on to actually demo, and we'll the actual code, and then we'll give this discussion a little bit more thought. Thanks everyone.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Oh, bye.